Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege to now yield 5 minutes to my friend and colleague, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Miller.
The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like most members of Congress, I have visited our men and women in uniform in Iraq. I've visited our wounded in the hospital at Ramstein Air Force Base in Germany and at the hospital at Balad Air Base in Iraq. I've offered my condolences to grieving families who have lost loved ones in Iraq. I respect and appreciate our men and women in uniform in Iraq. They have served nobly and they deserve our prayer. Mr. Speaker, they have done their duty. And now we must do our duty. Our duty to the Constitution, our duty to our country, our duty to our men and women in uniform is to look with clear eyes at the facts and to exercise independent judgment. For 4 years, this Congress has failed in that duty. For 4 years, this Congress has passed one resolution after another, offering uncritical support for the President's policies in Iraq. In June, Congress passed a resolution finding that we were well along the path to a sovereign, free, secure, and united Iraq, and that Iraq security forces were operating independently of our forces and were increasingly leading the fight to secure Iraq. Mr. Speaker, that's what Republicans did when they were in the majority. They played make-believe. Americans knew better then, and we certainly know better now. The Iraq Study Group report just a couple of months ago described the situation in Iraq as grave and deteriorating. The most recent National Intelligence estimate just a week ago described the situation in even starker terms. The violence is now feeding on itself, and is too complex to be called simply a civil war. The estimate concluded that all of the likely outcomes are grim. For 4 years, patriotic Americans, Democrats and Republicans alike, have anguished over events in Iraq and have given deep and prayerful thought to alternatives. But the Bush administration dismissed and insulted dissenters and often made fierce attempts to discredit them. Not even General Eric Shinseki, the Army Chief of Staff, or James Baker, Secretary of State for the first President Bush, were spared. And the Bush administration has treated criticisms by members of Congress as meddling, as sticking our nose in their war. House Democrats have offered plan after plan to alter our course in Iraq, and House Republicans have greeted every plan with strident attack. Let's consider the new plan that President Bush has proposed. The force initially committed to Iraq was well short of what General Shinseki said would be required to secure the country. When I visited Iraq 3 years ago, the presence of our forces in Baghdad may not have been enough to secure order, but it was more than enough to remind every Iraqi every day that there was a foreign army on their soil. When I visited Iraq a year and a half ago, our military forces in Baghdad were less noticeable. Our briefing officer explained that we had deliberately reduced our footprint to lessen the resentment of Iraqis, so that Iraqis would come into daily contact with Iraqi security forces, not our men and women. But the violence only increased. We tried twice last year to reduce the violence by increasing Iraqi and American forces in Baghdad. The Iraqi forces didn't show up, and twice the effort failed, and violence has continued to increase. Now we're trying it again and calling it a new plan. Less troops, more troops, less troops, more troops. House Republicans are playing make-believe again to call that a new plan. The apocalyptic violence in Iraq will not be solved militarily. Congressman David Price and I introduced a resolution setting forth a comprehensive plan, which Mr. Price described here the other day. We need to engage Iraq's neighbors through regional diplomacy to provide economic assistance conditioned on a genuine attempt at national reconciliation and to begin a phased withdrawal of our troops. Our plan includes many of the suggestions of the Iraq Study Group. The Iraq Study Group report was right. No path is certain of success, and after 4 years of failed policy, all of our options are grim. But the resolution we will vote on shortly is a first step toward doing our duty by looking realistically at events in Iraq and by forcing us to consider what our options really are. I yield back the balance of my time.